Select Committee to investigate the January 6th attack on the United States Capitol will be in order. Without objection, the chair is authorized to declare the committee in recess at any point. Pursuant to House Deposition Authority Regulation 10, the chair announces the committee's approval to release the deposition material presented during tonight's hearing.
And happy Saturday and welcome to The Deal. I'm your host, Ed Clark. It is Saturday, June 11th, 2022. And we're so happy you decided to join us today. There's a lot to talk about. We're going to concentrate a lot on the 1-6 committee hearings. We'll talk about inflation and some other things as it comes up, Supreme Court a little bit. But there's so much to talk about. There's so much to talk about in those 1-6 hearings. And of course, I can't talk about it by myself. I have to have Val Atkinson. Val Atkinson, welcome back to The Deal.
Thank you so much, Ed. Glad to be here.
Val, I know and you know that the 1-6 was an insurrection and an attempted coup. I think it's even clearer seeing the hearings. Some 20 million people tuned into it. I wish more people had. And we're going to talk about some of those issues today. But on your first observation, before we get into some of the detail, how effective was that? It was a long time coming. It lasted a little over 2 hours, but was it held at the right time in prime time? And do you think it carried the kind of weight they wanted it to carry?
Well, I'll have to answer that question, Ed, with the question. And the question is, what was the overarching purpose, goal, or strategy of the committee or of Democratic politics, whatever? In other words, if their goal is to set up a case for Merrick Garland and the Justice Department to bring charges and hold everybody accountable that did something wrong and make people, as you like to call it, Ed, perp walk. If that was the goal, they still got a little ways to go. But if their goal happened to be to change minds and to get those people who are still believing that there may have been some skullduggery in the whole election, and the election may have been stolen, and they may believe everything that Donald Trump says. If they were going down that rabbit hole after that, I don't think that the hearing has started off on the right path. I really don't.
Okay.
Because as you said, we had 20 million, should have been more. My question is, how many of those 20 million that tuned in already knew that the Steele logic was a lie, didn't believe a doggone thing that Donald Trump had to say? You know, how many of those? So we used to call it preaching to the choir. If that's the case, and you're trying to change minds, and the only people who tune in to listen to you are those folks who are already on your side, you don't really have the opportunity to change a lot of minds and make a lot of things happen. So going back to the beginning, I answer your question with the question. What is the purpose? Where are they going with this? Are they trying to indict, convict, and incarcerate somebody? Or are they trying to get people to get away from this nonsense about the election being stolen, come back and be regular Americans and have more votes tallied in the Democratic column come November of 2022? Like I said, it depends on what they're trying to do.
Yeah, that's a good assessment. I will have to agree with you there. Uh, let's back up for a second though, before we even get to the hearing and before we even get to why we're here in the first place. There's a clip I want you to look at of Benny Thompson. This was also in his opening when he talks about being from Bolton, Mississippi, a town I have been to actually, because I was in Mississippi doing a number of disasters and had to work with Benny Thompson. Not had to, but work with Benny Thompson because he was a representative there. He's a committed person to American democracy. He's also a Kappa, by the way. I'll throw that out since you got on your Kappa shirt. But anyway, this is Benny Thompson. I want to talk to you about the historical setup that he does right here.
I was born, raised, and still live in Bolton, Mississippi, a town with a population of 521, which is midway between Jackson and Vicksburg, Mississippi, and the Mississippi River. I'm from a part of the country where people justify the actions of slavery, the Ku Klux Klan, and lynching. I'm reminded of that dark history as I hear voices today try and justify the actions of the insurrectionists on January 6, 2021. Over the next few weeks, hopefully you will get to know the other members, my colleagues up here, and me. We represent a diversity of communities.
So, Val, so Congressman Thompson talks about being from Bolton, a town of about 500, about the same size as Bun Level, North Carolina, my favorite town that I often mention on here. But he talks about people who lived there who tried to justify slavery and they tried to justify the Klan. And these are some of the same people using the same tactics to justify trying to. And I guess I want to say this right. They wanted to overthrow the government because they invoke a lot of this 1776 bullshit all the time about how, they're the ones who are protecting democracy. Talk to me about this historical aspect to what Benny Thompson was saying about those people in their attempt to justify what they did.
Well, Benny is absolutely right. If we go back to the antebellum period in this country, where people were building up to the war, we find that people didn't have to justify anything about what they did and what their behavior happened to be because they were in charge. Then after the war, with the Reconstruction Amendments in place and freedom for the previously enslaved people and all of those things, now you have to do things a little bit differently. And you have to justify why it's not discrimination, why you're not being prejudiced, why you're not being unequal in your treatment of Americans. And you try to get away with it. Well, as Representative Thompson said, the same thing is going on right now. It's the absolute same thing. You got a group of people in America, Ed, who really can't stand the idea of having to share the bounties of this great, wonderful land with people who don't look like them. And they're not going to do that easily. And they'll do everything they can to fight against having to do that, actually unwillingly. So he's right about that. And we come to the same place again. I want to bring everybody's attention to some of those clips that you shown earlier about the inner workings of the Capitol building when you had people in there with Confederate flags, the Confederate flag inside of the Capitol building. It doesn't belong there. We fought a war for 4 years and won and lost more people in that war than all the other wars that America has been involved in combined. And you have the loser of that war, the people who tried to destroy America, you have them having their flag represented there. It's unfathomable.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable, and it's still going on. And I think Representative Thompson is absolutely correct in making the comparison that he did.
Yeah, I thought there was a good setup to it, Val. I want to remind people, if you're watching, this is the deal. That's Val Atkinson. I'm Ed Clark. You can also hear us on Spotify, on uh, Stitcher, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, wherever you're listening to us. We've been picking up a lot of listeners and viewers, Val. So we want to thank those folks for doing that and people sharing this. We had a whole bunch of listeners last week from the UK. And I think that was because we had Professor Andrea Freeman from the University of Hawaii, who happened to be speaking in London last week, or actually just the other day on the 9th, about whiteness and milk. We have some specials coming up too. We've been in touch with some legal scholars and we want to talk some more about these hearings, the legal implications of them. Are people going to go to jail, do perp walks, and which I really want to see, but I'm not sure that's going to happen. But at any rate, please share the link for any of those methods to get to us. You can always go to the dealwithedclark.com as well, and read my latest stuff. I'll talk about my latest piece in the last segment, Val, because we also want to make sure we cover some other news, and I want to talk about inflation in our last segment. But back to why we're here this morning, the 1-6 committee hearings. One of the things that uh, you know I anticipated was that the Fox News people were not going to show the hearings, Val, but they were going to have a lot to say about it the next day. Here's a clip from Fox News. They had a former prosecutor on there, Adam McCarthy, talking about the hearings, and let's deconstruct what they're trying to say here. Uh, this is Fox News.
Well, I think they have a very powerful story to tell, Dana, but they've undercut it by not having a fair fact-finding proceeding. I used to prosecute bad guys for a long time. We even let terrorists and mafiosi and scam artists have their own day in court where they get to present their own side of the story. And here what you have is a committee that's all, I mean, the only credential that unifies the whole committee is that they're anti-Trump, which is a perfectly fine attitude to have. But there's another side to this story, and in a normal fact-finding process, they would get the chance to tell their side of it.
I guess, Andy, I was going into it thinking about what the Democratic member of the committee said a couple months ago. They're going to blow the roof off. So I was waiting for a blockbuster. But perhaps some people perceived there to be a blockbuster there, and others did not. But if you had a blockbuster, would you not reveal it, given the considerably large audience that was watching on all the networks last night?
So Val, if I don't know if you caught this, but on the crawl across the bottom of the screen, as they're saying the hearings are unfair, and there were no blockbusters revealed in it, it says that Bill Barr says that it was complete hoodoo. That there was no way in the world that Trump won, but they never mentioned that throughout the whole clip. If you listen to the whole clip, they never really get to that. I know it's easy to deconstruct Fox, but could you please do it for our listeners and viewers? What were they trying to say? They were trying to throw some shade, but I think they fell a little flat.
Fell very, very flat. They are trying to say that there was no need or reason to listen to or look at a reason. They're trying to show reason why they didn't air it full time, completely unshared with anything else. And they didn't make that case. They didn't make the case at all. They did talk about, they did ask the question, where is the bombshell that the Democrats talked about? I didn't see it, and those kinds of things. Well, that whole bombshell issue came out of the mouth of one particular congressperson. And I kind of cringed when he said it, when I first heard it, simply because I go back to some of my sales training, and you don't overpromise and underdeliver. You do just the opposite. you under promise and you over deliver. That's the way it's supposed to happen. So I didn't like when he came up and talked about, oh, you got to tune in. It's going to be a bombshell. It's going to knock your top off. It's going to do this. And I'm saying, why are you saying that? You're giving these people ammunition to come back and say that you haven't been successful. But be that as it may, I think it was really a bad deal. It was a disservice to the American public that one major news carrier or entertainment carrier called Fox News didn't even carry the show full-time live like most other networks and cable carriers did. It was just unbelievable that they would do that and then come back and try to analyze it later. That goes to show you where they are. They're not a purveyor of truth, of news. They don't give you information and let you make up your own mind. They try to tell you how to think. That's the exact opposite of what they should be doing. I think at some point down the road, and we haven't gone there yet, some communications commissioner down at the FCC is going to get the gonads to really take a look at whether or not Fox News is owning up to its purpose in terms of why they were granted permission to have a license in the first place. And are you living up to that? Are you doing what your license says you're supposed to be doing? And if that be the case, they could be in a little bit of trouble.
Well, I can answer that question for hell no, they ain't doing it, and they don't even attempt to do it. And I thought it was really cynical of them trying to analyze afterwards, and supposedly they weren't even concerned about it. The last piece I'll say about this, because we need to take a break in a second, is that the Republicans are fond of having hearings that are contentious and people hollering at each other and all that kind of stuff. We saw, if you go back to the Benghazi hearings, which were complete hoodoo and crazy and unhinged and making all kind of allegations that eventually even they just dropped. But the damage was done. It did damage to Hillary Clinton. One of the accusations is this is just about doing damage to Donald Trump. I think the damage has already been done to Donald Trump. I don't think there's anything else to say about, what could happen to Donald Trump. Donald Trump did the damage to himself. And I don't think there's anything else that we need to be concerned about here. But I hear some music, so let's take a break. And when we come back, I want to pick up on one person's testimony that they showed, and that's Bill Barr. And we'll talk about that and a whole bunch more when we come back. You're watching The Deal.
Keeping with its legacy of producing outstanding attorneys, the Rogers firm is pleased to announce its newest associate, Attorney Ariel Chapman. Attorney Chapman is a former assistant DA and brings years of experience and legal excellence into his position as a proud member of the Rogers firm.
The Rogers Law Firm, a firm dedicated to justice.
The Rogers Law Firm, a firm dedicated to justice, at 111 Person Street, Fayetteville, North Carolina. You can call them at 910-433-0833.
Later on that evening, Mr. Tarrio even posted a video which seemed to resemble him in front of the Capitol with a black cape, and the title of the video was Premonition. The evidence developed by the Select Committee and the Department of Justice highlights how each group participated on the attack on the Capitol on January 6th. In fact, the investigation revealed that it was individuals associated with the Proud Boys who instigated the initial breach at the Peace Circle at 12:53 p.m.
And welcome back to our second segment of The Deal. I'm your host, Ed Clark. That's Val Atkinson. It is Saturday, June 11th, 2022. We're so happy that you took the time to stop in. There's so much to talk about, Val. In the lead-in, coming back in, I just played some of that raw footage that was seen, some of it for the first time. Some of it we've seen before because we were watching it live that day when it was going on. And clearly it was not a tourist visit to the Capitol. And clearly people were getting hurt. We know people died, 5 people died. And in addition to that, we know that a lot of the people who ended up there for a reason that is completely made up. It's just they were at a Stop the Steal rally, right? That was the guise under which they were in D.C. in the first place. They met down the street from the Capitol. Donald Trump and his family got on stage, Rudy Giuliani, the usual suspects. They riled up the crowd, and then they walk up Pennsylvania Avenue. And what you can see from the clips, like I said in the lead in, was people doing criminal activity, breaking into the Capitol, breaking windows, doing all kind of things. So here's the setup, Val. They're there supposedly for Stop the Steal, but the Attorney General of the United States at the time was a guy named Bill Barr, who I can tell you I don't like him and I don't trust him. I think he's weird on top of all of that. But he did tell the president something about the election. Let's look at that, and then you tell me what you heard from Bill Barr.
No, just what I've been through. I had 3 discussions with the president that I can recall. One was on November 23rd, one was on December 1st, and one was on December 14th. And I've been through sort of the give and take of those discussions. And in that context, I made it clear I did not agree with the idea of saying the election was stolen and putting out this stuff, which I told the president was bullshit. And, I didn't want to be a part of it. And that's one of the reasons that went into me deciding to leave when I did. I observed, I think it was on December 1st, that how can you can't live in a world where the incumbent administration stays in power based on its view, unsupported by specific evidence, that there was fraud in the election.
Okay, Val. So Bill Barr says it's bullshit, which is one of my favorite words. Because it encapsulates a lot of stuff by saying it's real clear what he's saying, that Donald Trump did not lose the election. Explain to me how people like Bill Barr now can go in front of the committee and testify. I just feel like they weren't doing enough during the presidency. They allowed this monstrosity to be unleashed on the American people. That's my problem with Bill Barr. I'm glad he's telling the truth now. But, where were they when Donald Trump was running amok for 4 years?
Well, on Bill Barr, you have to go back and ask why he submitted that 19-page paper to get the job that he had. He knew what he was doing. He knew in order to hold his job, he had to suck up to the president, had to pretend for a long time, that is, that everything he said was true, walk it behind him like the guy in the parade with the shovel walking behind the elephants. So he knew that was his job. Now he comes in and he sees the end of the Trump administration, the end of the political life of Donald Trump, if you will. Now he wants to get religion and start telling the truth. Barr is crazy enough to think that the American public is going to have a huge, as the Germans say, grosser case of amnesia. That we're going to forget all of the things he did, how and why he did it, and just take this one little bit of dancing around the floor with the truth for a second or two, and let that override everything else he's done and why he did it. I want Barr to see him walking. He's one of the guys that really allowed and showed Trump how to do what he really wanted to do. Trump didn't have the political savvy and wherewithal to do the things that he did. He had the rot gut motivation to do it, but he didn't understand politics enough to know how to do it. Barr was the one that came in and gave him the lead to say, okay, you know, you need to do this way, and you don't need to do that. And it's okay to do that, and get your people in the house to do so and so. And so he was the puppeteer behind the curtain, making sure that Donald Trump had the opportunity to do all of the vile, hideous things that he did while he was president of the United States. I'm like you, I appreciate what he did, to tell the truth, to say the whole harangue about the election being stolen was a bunch of bullshit. I appreciate him saying that much, but I cannot relieve him of all of the other crap that he stepped in for the past 4 or 5 years in his support and his assistance to Donald Trump.
Yeah, you know, the other part of that clip, Val, that gives me that same queasy feeling in my gut is that Liz Cheney did the setup for it. And, you know, obviously Liz Cheney is in the fight for her political life. She lost her number 3 position in the Republican Party in Congress. She's in a battle just to keep her seat in Congress, and she may or may not even be back next term. Talk to me about Liz Cheney and what do you think her motivation is? Because, you know, obviously she's the child of Dick Cheney, and they have a long history in Republican politics. I've always thought about the Cheneys as being very to the right, but more to the right because of money and less on the ideological spectrum. You know, Dick Cheney made a fortune by going to war, and made a fortune for his buddies by going to war. That's why we invaded Iraq. I don't care what anybody says. I mean, Dick Cheney made money for Halliburton and those companies that he used to work for. These companies that used to work out in the oil fields converted all of a sudden to being able to provide services to the military in Iraq and Iran and different places where we've gone to do battle over the last 40 years. But talk to me about Liz Cheney a little bit and how you view her. Obviously, again, you're appreciative of her saying something, but I still can't get over the fact that she voted with Trump almost more than anybody else.
Well, in order to come out as she did, Liz Cheney had to make a existential decision that she was prepared to sever her relationships totally with the GOP, the grand old party, the Republican Party. And that's what she's done, because it's not in her hands anymore. It's in the hands of the typical Republican voter and party chiefs that are around as to whether they would let her even be a Republican anymore, sitting on the back seat. She'll never be out front anymore in this Republican Party, we know. So I think Liz Cheney made a conscious decision that she was prepared to go it alone. She was prepared to start a new conservative movement free of the Republican Party as we know it now. And with her father's support and with the support of some Bushes down in Texas, I think that what you are saying is the nucleus of a new Republican Party. It reminds me of the old Whig Party and their exit. When the Whig Party started falling off, and when they fell off in 1854, up popped the Republican Party. And a lot of other things went along with that, but keep this in mind. I think we're about to see Liz Cheney play a significant role in the reshaping of political parties in the United States House of Politics.
Mm-hmm. You know what? We didn't talk about this in our prep for today, but I'm glad you bring that up because we always like to throw some history in there in talking about the demise of the Whigs and then the emergence of the Republicans. Because it was over a big issue, right? It was over slavery and expansion west and all that stuff. Then you had the know nothings thrown in there at the same time. So, sort of a transitional party that wasn't really a party, but it was people that were, had particular feelings about something. So I'm going to ask you the political science question, the professor question. So put on that hat here. Uh, it's ripe for that because there are people like Adam Kinzinger on the committee as well as Liz Cheney. But do they have the guts to actually form another party? Would it be another party, or will they have this continued tug of the Republican brand? Because in America, for some reason, we've got the notion that there could only be two parties, and a lot of the system is set up so only the two parties, get any largesse from it, right? If you want to run for office, Republicans and Democrats always are on the ballot. But if you want to be a green or a libertarian or whatever, you got to jump through hoops to do it. So, from the political science perspective, is there a way for a real another major right party to emerge, or is it just going to be a fight for the Republican nameplate?
I think what has to happen is that Liz Cheney, and I'll use her name since we started talking about her, she's going to have some help. I don't think Kinzinger and Liz Cheney and Dick Cheney and Jeb Bush at all, we talk about all those kind of people, I don't think they have the moxie and the wherewithal to start a new party in competition with the existing Republican Party. Now, based on what happens as a result of 1-6, and we may see some perp walks, we may see some incarcerations of some high ups, and that may cause people to start leaving the party, to start declaring their independence of the Republican Party. Any kind of forward movement or slippage of the Republican Party to the degree that the numbers start to decline precipitously, that opens the door for Liz Cheney. Then she can come in and say, well, we have another group. In other words, she can put up a situation where she is giving those people who want to leave the sinking ship called the GOP, she's offering them a place to go. That's different than trying to build a place to go and then selling them on the idea of leaving the GOP and coming to this new place. So that's what I meant by Cheney needs some help. And this is why she's going to do everything she can in 1-6 to make the committee successful, to bring to justice those folks who've committed crimes. The higher ups, the better, because it's going to help her in the long run to be out in the forefront of this new party that replaces the old demised GOP.
So it won't be the grand old party. It'll be a new. It'll be a new party. Val, the other thing that Liz Cheney did is she did a setup when she talked about the vice president. Let's take a look at that clip and we'll wrap up this segment.
We will focus on President Trump's efforts to pressure Vice President Mike Pence to refuse to count electoral votes on January 6th. Vice President Pence has spoken publicly about this.
President Trump is wrong. I had no right to overturn the election. The presidency belongs to the American people and the American people alone. And frankly, there is no idea more un-American than the notion that any one person could choose the American president.
What President Trump demanded that Mike Pence do wasn't just wrong, it was illegal and it was unconstitutional. You will hear this in great detail.
We need to establish the narrative that that the president is still in charge and that things are steady or stable or Woodstock thing. I immediately interpret that as politics, politics, politics. Red flag for me personally, no action, but I remember it distinctly.
And you will hear from witnesses how the day played out inside the White House, how multiple White House staff resigned in disgust, and how President Trump would not ask his supporters to leave the Capitol. It was only after...
So Val, that Mark Milley, who was head of the Joint Chiefs, he's the guy that has all the ribbons on his jacket there, and he was also part of that walk that Donald Trump took when they walked across the street to the Episcopal Church, and Trump held the Bible upside down when they broke up the Black Lives Matter peaceful protest, by the way, and made a big show of it. Bill Barr was in that same contingent of people who walked across the street. But this clip was talking about Mark Meadows and Milley talking about the vice president. Now, again, I have problems with Mike Pence. I'm glad he said what he said about this whole thing. I'm glad he didn't go along with the okie doke. But General Milley indicated that, one, Trump was not happy about the vice president getting some shine, as it were, as we say down in Harnett County. He didn't want the vice president to get any shine, as if he was running things, so I had to change that narrative. But there was also sort of an indication that he was okay with people hanging Mike Pence. that would be Donald Trump. He was okay with people hanging Mike Pence. Talk to me about people like General Milley, who joined the administration. I guess if you're a former military man, and so if duty calls and somebody says that we need for you to serve, you go serve, and then you try to give the best advice possible. But kind of deconstruct this whole thing with Milley and how he handled things, and then also this second part of it about hanging Mike Pence and how Donald Trump and Mark Meadows weren't happy with Pence appearing to be running the show.
Well, Milley was sort of caught betwixt and between, as we say. He knew what his role in his job was as Joint Chief Chair. And at the same time, he knew the travails, the propensities of the 45th President of the United States. He was afraid, and he in much said so, that Trump was going to give an order that may have started World War III. It was just that bad. And it forced Milley to talk with all of those people in the chain of command that are responsible for managing orders all the way up and down the line to give the final okay to fire nuclear weapons. And make them know that they aren't to entertain any notion from anybody if he's not involved. He even went further to talk to his equal with the Japanese government. With the Chinese government, letting them know that, hey, we are not thinking about starting a nuclear war. Don't let one start by accident, okay? Anything happens that you think's funny or whatever, please call me first. And I'll do the same for you. It may be up to us to stop this craziness that's going on. Having that kind of talk going on behind a president's back really is scary, because you're talking about the destruction of the species now. You're not just talking about a Republican or Democratic election. When you're talking about the survival of a species, the form of government, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter at all. So Milley knew the gravity of the situation that he was in. And I was very proud to say that I'm a former military man that had somebody that I could really look up to and respect what he tried to do in those circumstances. When the rubber met the road, he did his job, he did it correctly. Even after the walk across the street to the church, where, as you said, Trump was holding the Bible upside down, trying to mimic a photo shoot as the reason to disrupt the Black Lives Matter protest, which was very peaceful. Even during that time frame, Milley knew that he should have not been walking with the president's party in uniform because it had the sense of saying that the president had the military behind him. The military was 100% there and prepared to do anything that needed to be done to take over the situation. And that's the exact opposite that message that he wanted to portray. So I look at those things, just those two things there, Ed, and tell you that we are very fortunate to have a guy like Milley in the position that he's in right now, and more fortunate that he was in that position under Donald Trump.
Yeah, we definitely should be glad of that. Hey, Val, I hear some music, so that means we need to take a break. When we come back, I'm going to finish up this thing about Mike Pence. Then I want to talk about the would-be speaker, Kevin McCarthy, because he had some bullshit to say himself the day after the hearing. And we'll wrap up with Joe Biden in California talking about inflation, because I do think that's important and we need to talk about that. So we'll take a break. We'll be right back after this statement.
It affected my perspective. I respect Attorney General Barr. So I accepted what he was saying.
I surrender. All right, pal. Get ready for the day, buddy.
Hey, Dad. Hey, Dad. Do we have a gun?
What's up?
Do we have a gun?
To our final segment of the deal. I'm your host, Ed Clardy. It is Saturday, June 11th, and we've been talking about the 1-6 committee hearings heavily today because I think it's the most important story this week, Val. We know that there were mass shootings this week, but we're in America, and we've talked about this before. Only certain mass shootings get coverage, and then we forget about them and go about our business. We know that coronavirus is still spiking in some places around America. We would love to talk about that too, but we can't because Val, we were on the verge of potentially having the vice president murdered. I mean, it's not a joke. I mean, there were people in there with assault weapons. There was a gallows set up outside of the Capitol building. The conditions were right because you had these people who were so disrespectful. You mentioned it earlier. That had the Confederate flag within the Capitol building. So clearly they're not American, and they would not have seen why they couldn't make the leap to killing Mike Pence. And then on top of that, the president himself said that, well, maybe he deserves it. That came out. I think that was a bombshell. I don't know everybody knew that Trump was willing to allow the mob to kill Mike Pence. So let's wrap that part up, Val. What is Mike Pence's place in history going to be with this? I still don't think he's a hero. I think he did the right thing. He did what his job was. But he's for 4 years, and on that first day of the Trump administration, I don't know if you can recall when they were all sitting around the table, and he all but gave Donald Trump a tongue kiss and effusive praise of Donald Trump before the administration had even done anything. So talk to me about Mike Pence and how he's going to be viewed with all of this.
Well, Mike Pence, I believe personally, is not going to be viewed very well. I liken him to the view that we hold now of Spiro Agnew, that was the vice president under Richard Nixon. and how he had to bail out and resign his office because of tax issues that arose from the fact that he was accepting bribes when he was governor of the state of Maryland. We don't have all of those connections with Mike Pence, of course, but I think his relationship with Donald Trump is going to still paint him in a very bad light as far as history is going to review this. The fact that he did not follow Trump's orders to overturn the election is not going to excuse all of the other times that he followed orders which he should not have, because there is a thing called the 25th Amendment. And it allows the vice president and the cabinet to take over from the president when things get bad. It's just like a military guy being told, yeah, you follow orders from your superior officers, but there's a caveat there. With the exception, you don't have to follow unlawful orders. So Mike Pence had a duty and an obligation to not follow some of the things that Donald Trump was trying to do, and to try to start to invoke the 25th Amendment, if necessary, to take power away from a madman and to save the republic. So I don't know how he's going to be reviewed on all of that. And he's going to be reviewed very harshly for even accepting the vice presidency under a novice like Donald Trump and what he did. There were tons of people who resigned their positions under Trump before the 4 years were out because they couldn't stand it anymore. Pence could have been one of those guys that would have saved his image, but he stayed there. He just stayed there until it was all gone. I personally am glad that he did stay down, because if a replacement for him, somebody worse than Pence, a real Trump lackey, would have been in that place instead of Pence, would he have called Dan Quayle, as Trump did, and some of the other people that he got advice from as to what should I do? The president wants me to not certify and throw it into the House so that we can have a contentious election and the House will select the next president. I shudder to think what would have happened if Pence would have been replaced by somebody like Kevin McCarthy, for example. What was that?
Well, that's a good segue, because I want to talk about Kevin McCarthy. Another person I think is an odious person who tries to be as bad as Ted Cruz and as Marco Rubio and some of these other people. Somebody who clearly did not believe in Donald Trump before he ran for president. As Trump took office, he was kind of squishy, and then all of a sudden became a Trump sycophant for the longest time. And then the day after the attempted coup, McCarthy gets up in the House along with a lot of other people and say, oh, these people need to be held accountable, blah, blah, blah. But let's look at Kevin McCarthy, and then I will deconstruct what we just heard.
I think they might be playing politics. And speaking of that, Speaker Pelosi's Select Committee on January 6th is unlike any other committee in American history. In fact, it is the most political and least legitimate committee in American history. It has used congressional subpoenas to attack Republicans, violate due process, and infringe on the political speech of private citizens.
So, Val,
He's actually been caught.
More fuckery here. Kevin McCarthy says that the 1-6 committee is the worst committee ever, most partisan, blah, 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 blah. He forgets Benghazi hearings. He forgets all the other Fast and Furious hearings and all the other shenanigans that these people have pulled. Kevin McCarthy wants to be the Speaker of the House, right? Isn't that what this is all about? He's trying to figure out a way to thread the needle here. he says that there were some bad people there. They need to be held accountable, blah, 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 because that's what you're supposed to say. But he really wants you to still believe that 1/6 was semi-justified because the election was stolen from Donald Trump, right? Isn't that what Kevin McCarthy is doing here?
Absolutely. You know, while you were talking, Ed, I wanted to make a little note about that may explain a little bit about how and why Kevin McCarthy does some of the things that he does. When Trump came to office, he brought in to the American presidency something that I don't think had ever existed before. He brought in a salesperson, and I'm really being kind when I use that word. Maybe some people prefer to use the term con artist, but he brought that into the presidency, and that covered and flavored everything else. Because being a salesperson and a con artist, you're not stymied by the truth. The truth doesn't come into it anymore. As a matter of fact, the truth can be used as your savior, because you can use that to distract and deflect your enemy while he is pursuing the truth and trying to justify things. You can be on another path trying to really get other people, sycophants, to follow your lead and get done what you want done. And that's what Trump brought in. Trump said, let them people argue and be debating over there about whether I said X or Y and what the truth is, whatever. I'm going to be over here on the other side, getting more people like Proud Boys and Oath Keepers and people like that to come in and do my dirty work. They don't care about the truth, you know. And we'll let all those other guys over there on the other side be doing that. Kevin McCarthy has really found out at a late stage. He wasn't like this in the beginning, but he's come to know now that that's a great strategy that Trump brought to the White House. Is don't deal in truth. Don't let truth get in the way. Just sell your product and keep selling it until enough people buy and you move on. And you let those other guys have a circular argument with themselves and other people about what is truth and what is not. They can't win having that argument over there, because everybody already know that 1 and 1 are 2. And if you're going to spend the next 8 years arguing that 1 and 1 are 2, you can't do anything else. I got you.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you know, the Trump administration is famous for having people who said that there are alternative truths. Kellyanne Conway. So, at any rate, we'll put a pin in the hearings there, because over the next several weeks, there's going to be more. I think we are going to hear some bombshells. There are going to be people from Pence's staff who are going to testify. There are going to be people from the polling people who did polling for Donald Trump who told him that he had lost. There'll be people from Fox News, believe it or not. The political guy who does the who makes the call on who wins the election is going to testify that they told the White House that Donald Trump lost, and they have facts to back that up. So it's going to be interesting over the next few weeks, and we'll be here to talk about it. Val, I can't leave this off the table. The inflation numbers came out. Consumer price index came out. I can look out my window here, and I'm looking at a gas station where the price is $4.93 for regular gas at one of the large international corporations. I'll just leave it at that. I won't call their name, but somebody who used to be in the White House used to work there. And Val, gas prices are continuing to escalate, and so are food prices. Let's look at this clip, and then we'll talk about inflation.
A president in damage control.
I understand Americans are anxious, and they're anxious for good reason.
Speaking from a port in Los Angeles, Joe Biden's blaming shippers, oil companies, and Vladimir Putin for record high inflation.
I'm doing everything in my power to blunt Putin's price hike and bring down the cost of gas and food.
A new economic report delivering the White House an unwelcome surprise. Inflation surging 8.6% from a year ago, the fastest increase since 1981. Petrol's up almost 50% in the US, groceries 12%.
You know, all the tips that I literally just made the night before that I wanted to put into like maybe bills or save, I can't.
The Treasury Secretary admitted she was wrong to downplay inflation fears. Now she's playing down concerns of a recession.
There's nothing to suggest that inflation and that a recession's in the works.
Still, some analysts.
So that's President Biden was out in California. He was talking about the reasons for inflation, Val. It's hurting people in their pocketbooks. My piece this week is about, it's called Gaslit on gas prices. That there's no direct correlation with the economy and gas prices all the time, and especially this time around. There's nothing that would suggest that gas should be $5 in North Carolina for regular gas. No, there's no real justification for it other than gas prices are what people say they are. But the same can be said for some food prices that are very high right now. I don't want to dismiss how people are feeling, Val, about, it's hurting their pocketbook. But do you think there's something else at play here why prices are rising? Could it be that corporations want to see the Democrats lose? And this is one of the ways they can help the Republicans get back in office without being overt. I'm cynical, so maybe I'm just, making shit up. But I got a feeling that this is a little more to do with corporate greed than really the cost of things actually going up.
Well, if it doesn't have anything to do with corporate politics and them weighing in and putting their thumb on the scale and trying to help the Republicans in November, if it doesn't have anything to do with that, it definitely has something to do with corporate greed. I mean, that is the lifeline of businesses in America. If you don't have greed, if you don't want more, if you think too much is not enough, I don't know. You can't make it in business here. So I'm sure that they took every opportunity they could to raise prices, to get their fair share of what was going on in the economy through inflation or whatever. So yeah, they did that, and it shouldn't be. It shouldn't be that way. But to have one particular man or one particular party be blamed for all of the inflation that's going on and that sort of thing is crazy too. But they have become talking points to this one particular network that you and I talked about, Fox News. It's become talking points for them. Every time, the last Thursday of each month, the first Thursday of each month, they want to take a look and say, what's going on? How can we bang Joe Biden around the head because your gas prices are going up and you can't take vacations and you don't have milk on the shelves and you don't have this and that. And it's all the fault of the current administration. But one thing they never do, Ed, they never say, if I were in, it wouldn't happen because this is what I would do. Or this is what I'm going to do to make sure it doesn't happen while I'm in. Put me in and I'll do this for you. They never get that way. They constantly talk about how bad things are and who is at blame. And they let you take that other leap yourself to say, well, I'm going to vote these guys out because the right, the GOP has told me they are at fault. So I'm going to vote them out of office. And that's all they want. They'll take the rest after that.
Yeah, they want you to buy into that. So please read Gaslit on gas prices, which is my newest piece on the deal with edclark.com. In the meantime, before we run out of time, Val Atkinson, what's going on? What do we got to look forward to?
Connections tomorrow morning, 8 o'clock. Foxy 107, 104. It's time to talk about what's going on in and around not only the Triangle and the state, but the world. We're going to have yourself on there and Irv Jonah, who is our legal analyst and contributor. And we'll talk to you about some of the things that we've talked about here from more of a legalistic standpoint than we normally do because of 1-6. But we'll touch all the bases. So tune in tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock.
Yeah, because I only play a lawyer on TV. Irv Jonah is a real lawyer. So we can have him chime in on legal issues. Speaking of that, we've contacted some lawyers, and again, look for specials, the deal during the week, like we did last week on the milk and baby formula. We're hoping to have one where we have some legal analysts come in and talk about, from their perspective, what they saw during the hearings. If you have show ideas, please send them in. Guest ideas. If you want to contribute, you can. I'm working on a new thing. I've been telling you about the Deal Radio that we're working on, but we're also working on an app that you can put on your phone where you can leave comments, either video or audio, and then we can play them during the show. So if you want to be a participant, we also have scheduled during the summer, we're probably going to do some live again, and those will be on Wednesday nights when we do those. So when we have a schedule of the lives where you can call in and participate. So there's a lot of exciting stuff going on in the deal land. Val Atkinson, I drag him along, to make sure I don't say anything stupid. He's the history and a political science expert. I'm just a big mouth that runs off at the mouth. So, but in the meantime, this is what you need to do. It's really nice here in Raleigh, North Carolina today, where I'm looking out from the studio. Please go out and do something fun today. Spend time with family. Enjoy the weather. But more importantly, go do something good for somebody, and we'll see you next Saturday. You've been watching The Deal. Bye.